So, big developments have unfolded over the past 48 hours regarding a mineral resource agreement between Ukraine and the United States. Now, this deal is centered on Ukraine's vast deposits of rare earth minerals and other metals. These minerals, such as titanium, lithium, and graphite, are essential for technologies like smartphones, renewable energy systems, military equipment, and electronic vehicle batteries. Both Ukraine and the US announced a preliminary framework agreement, and the Ukrainian Prime Minister confirmed that Ukraine will contribute 50% of future revenues from its untapped state owned mineral, oil, and gas resources into a jointly managed reconstruction investment fund. This fund will be co owned by the US and Ukraine and is designed to finance the development of extraction and processing infrastructure, with the proceeds reinvested into Ukraine's post war recovery. Notably, the agreement excludes existing revenue sources, such as Ukraine's current oil and gas operations, focusing instead on the future potential of investment. Ukraine's natural resource wealth is estimated at $11 trillion, making this a pretty substantial long-term partnership. However, this deal certainly has its challenges. President Zelensky has stressed the need for U.S. security guarantees to protect his nation amid Russia's ongoing war. While the agreement acknowledges American support for Ukraine's pursuit of a lasting peace, it stops short of offering concrete commitments. This gap has raised concerns in Kyiv, where leaders see security as a critical counterpart to sharing their resources. When asked about this, Trump said the deal gives Ukraine, quote, military equipment and the right to fight on, and originally the right to fight. End quote. Now, it's worth noting the U.S. aid to Ukraine has not been completely turned off by President Trump, but it's not exactly flowing quite like it used to either. Military aid specifically is still moving, and the Biden administration, before leaving office, pushed through a bunch of aid packages, including a $500 million chunk announced in January at a meeting in Ramstein with allies. There's also about $3.8 billion left from the funds Congress approved that Trump hasn't stopped yet either. Zelensky himself said on January 25th that military aid from the U.S. has not stopped, thank God. Now, early drafts of the mineral deal also sparked some controversy. Initial U.S. demands reportedly included $500 billion in mineral revenues as compensation for the nearly $376 billion in aid provided since Russia invaded in 2022. Now, that $376 billion number was weirdly inflated to include things like U.S. troops in Poland, which aren't for Ukraine. That's for the collective defense of NATO. Now, facing pushback from Ukraine and European allies, though, the Trump administration did drop this provision and shifted the fund to joint ownership. Now, President Trump has praised the agreement as a very big deal, aligning with his goals of reducing U.S. dependence on China for critical minerals while offsetting wartime investments. Now, this coming Friday, Zelensky is scheduled to meet with Trump in Washington, D.C. to finalize details and address broader support, including military aid, an area that Trump has suggested scaling back in the past. Russia, meanwhile, is freaking out a bit. Why? Well, take a look at this map of mineral resources. Ukraine's mineral wealth is massive, and as I said, it's estimated at $11 trillion. Russia has been eyeing it for years. Since invading in 2022, Russia has seized about a fifth of Ukraine's land, including areas rich in minerals like coal, manganese, and lithium. Some estimates say resources worth $350 billion are now in Russian-held territory. So Russia kind of has a big problem here. The US is now the financial beneficiary of mineral rights that are rightfully Ukraine's, but Russia is sitting on top of. So what has Russia done? Well, they responded with a counteroffer, proposing access to minerals in Ukrainian territories it controls, which Russia is now calling new territories. Now, this is Putin's direct quote on the situation. As for new territories, it's the same. We are ready to attract foreign partners to the so-called new, to our historical territories, which have returned to the Russian Federation, end quote. Now, you notice in that quote, he talks about new, but then stops himself and rephrases it to historical territories. He has to do this because to call the territories new implies that they were never Russia's and Russia just took them and now they're new territories. So now he's having to reframe his own narrative to say, oh, well, they're just the historical territories of Russia. The problem is here, no one trusts Russia, not even the Trump administration, and those minerals are seen as the spoils of war. Thus, they're not legitimate. And if Kuwait in 1991 taught us anything, you don't mess with America's money and their investments that they've made under legitimate deals. We will go to war over that. So the Russians are trying to disrupt the US Ukraine partnership by offering the US Ukrainian minerals they stole. The concern is, though, what will the Trump administration's endgame be? Will it be a battle of who offers the US a better deal to those minerals? We know they are rightfully Ukraine's, but the US may just see it as a business deal. The old wives' tale of possession is 9/10 of the law, and Russia currently possesses much of those minerals. One thing is for sure, though, if there is a counteroffer from Russia the US is considering, we have not seen it. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian deal may be signed the day after tomorrow in Washington, and though the Trump administration has not officially provided security guarantees, the US will want to secure those mineral rights. So, how will the US access these minerals? Well, the framework doesn't provide full specifics, but it outlines a collaborative model. The US won't own or directly extract mineral resources, those remain under Ukrainian sovereignty. Instead, the Reconstruction Investment Fund serves as the mechanism, and that fund specifically talks about Ukrainian sovereignty, which again is problematic for Russia, who wants that gone. Ukraine will oversee mining and processing, likely through state entities, while the US shares in the profits and secures mineral supplies through trade arrangements and priority purchases. The fund could finance new mines, processing plants, and export facilities, enhancing Ukraine's capacity to tap its reserves. This setup prioritizes partnership over direct control, a shift from earlier, more demanding US terms. As for American companies, direct mining seems unlikely at this stage, given that it's so close to an active war zone that probably isn't going to go away anytime soon. And plus, Ukraine's government manages its state-owned resources. However, US firms could play a supporting role. They might form joint ventures with Ukrainian companies, and this is something we've seen in many countries elsewhere, including Russia, where American technology and expertise comes in and assists in building up the infrastructure. We saw that in the Russian oil industry, which is now struggling because the US has pulled out of that capability. There are major players in mining like Freeport-McMoRan or tech firms and defense firms. Even Tesla or Lockheed Martin could participate through contracts funded by the partnership. Alternatively, American businesses might supply equipment, build infrastructure, or purchase processed minerals, aligning with the strategic aim of diversifying supply chains away from China. There are major obstacles, though. Much of Ukraine's mineral wealth is located in eastern regions like Donetsk, and that lies in the war zone. And Russia holds that territory, making extraction risky without a ceasefire. Ukraine's insistence on retaining control also limits foreign involvement, and wartime conditions complicate the regulatory and logistical steps needed for progress. European leaders have expressed skepticism, with some calling the deal a secondary priority, unlikely to yield quick results. Still, the framework sets a foundation for economic cooperation, and with the details to be clarified on Friday, we may actually see something come of this. Looking ahead, the meeting between Trump and Zelensky will be pivotal. Will security guarantees materialize? How will the fund operate in practice, and who will oversee the investments? Could Russia's counteroffer sway U.S. priorities given Trump's focus on a swift resolution? Are we just exploiting the Ukrainians at this point? What could be potentially the end game here? Well, hopefully by the weekend we should have a clearer picture of its path forward in a more favorable term for Ukraine, and potentially even see Russia be sidelined completely from this negotiation, like the one Ukraine was sidelined from in Saudi Arabia.